HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Love Principle, Daily Practices for a Loving and Purposeful Life, by Dr. Michael B. Brown, read by Chris Sorensen. Introduction. We all want to be happy, successful, and fully and truly alive. We sometimes think other people have found the secret to these things, but we're unable to find it for ourselves. Perhaps we followed the detox diets, listened to the guru's tapes, watched the late-night infomercials, experimented with faith, held hands with greed or sexuality without license, and yet there's still a gnawing sense inside that something is missing. I reiterate, we want to be happy, successful, and fully and truly alive, but we don't know how. This book will seek to provide clear and simple answers to the question, how? How do I discover a life worth living? Note the word used is simple, not simplistic. There's a difference. Discovering what we desire most in life is not that difficult a task. Rather, the difficulty comes from doing what it takes to achieve it, as that often requires a radical shift in how we previously conducted our life's business. If you're ready to explore that, keep listening. In 1998, a man whom I consider one of the 2 or 3 greatest motivational speakers of the 20th century died. Leo Buscaglia helped Americans understand the underlying principle that results in happiness and peace in a way unlike any motivator before or since. His message was simple: find love, find life. It was not, however, simplistic. Building your life on the principle of active loving is perhaps the most difficult task imaginable because not everyone makes loving easy. It is not always simple even to love ourselves, let alone someone whose sole intent appears to be making the rest of the world miserable. And yet Buscaglia's message resonated with his audiences in a way that was nothing short of magical. That, I think, is because most of us, whether consciously or subconsciously, recognize truth when we hear it. Buscaglia's truth did not, of course, originate with him. It is the same truth proclaimed by the heroes of all the world's great faiths, the same truth that most frequently appears in the world's lasting poetry and drama, the same truth that quickens or breaks the hearts of those who have experienced it. There is no force so powerful as authentic love. That being the case, there is no life so meaningful as one born of and rooted in that force. Seated at a table next to mine in a Manhattan restaurant was a 30-something couple. As our proximity made it impossible not to hear at least some of what they were saying, I was intrigued when the young man concluded their discussion of a troubling event in the current news. He said, "That sort of thing happens all the time. It's sad to be sure, but I'm just one person. What can one person really do to make a difference in a world like this?" Not having been invited to participate in their conversation, and not wanting to appear to be eavesdropping, I resisted the temptation to respond. But had I been invited, I would have replied, "One person can love. That is exactly what one person can do, and one person's love will make a dent in the world's armor. Then if someone else is inspired by what they witnessed, they will make a dent as well, inspiring another and another, until at last the armor cracks and the world can actually be transformed. Furthermore, I would have added, by the very act of loving, the frustration and resignation I hear in your voice can be replaced by meaning and joy." That is what I suppose I should have said, whether or not I was invited to do so. Perhaps I can still speak the truth to him, if by chance he reads this book. What you and I can do, and are equipped to do even within mortal limitations, is to love. That much we can accomplish if we are willing to do the disciplined work required. Love has the capacity to change things, to change people, to change each of us. By living lives based on the principle of active loving, we arrive at inner places of peace, positivity, and meaning that all the great motivators of the ages have hoped for their listeners. Over years of living and wearing a variety of hats, from preacher to motivational speaker to counselor to professor to friend to spouse to parent, I've consistently observed that those who love the most live the best. It is an undeniable principle of life. By that I do not mean soft, syrupy sentimentality. Instead, I mean real, raw, down-in-the-trenches love that sometimes defies logic. Imagine if individuals were to make the following single commitment. From this day forward, I will base all my relationships and all my interactions with neighbors and all my treatment of self simply on the principle of love. What would be the ramification of that one statement as it applies to global issues, local communities, social systems, institutions, families, relationships, or self-understanding? Life as we know it would be transformed if we finally began not merely to acknowledge but also to practice the truth that love is what life is all about. Jesus, a wise Jewish rabbi, reminded his audience of the teachings of the Torah, found in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, that love is at the heart of authentic living. He said that in order to find life, we are called upon to love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Mark chapter 12, verses 30 through 31. All the great faiths of the world have used similar language to state the same principle. All the compassionate humanists of the ages have done the same. In short, the great minds of the century have been telling us since the genesis of recorded history that whatever else we might have, without love we are impoverished. Likewise, they have reminded us ad infinitum that whatever else we may lack, when we find love, we find life. In this book, I will provide a framework for living based on that historic but too often ignored premise. It will not be sentimental, but rather, I hope, practical and helpful. Love is not about sweet songs, soft sonnets, or sugary cards. It can be demanding and exacting. It is both intellectual and spiritual. It involves challenges and changes to one's daily way of doing business. In the 90s, one of the phrases quoted ad nauseum in virtually every meeting or gathering was a personal paradigm shift, meaning a fundamental change in the way a person or group does business. Whether or not you could count on anything else, when going into a meeting in the 90s, you could always be sure you would hear that phrase at least once. The 90s and the century in which they resided are gone, but the phrase is worth retaining. To build a life on the foundation of active loving is about that, a personal paradigm shift. It is not easy, but it assures that life can become enriching to self and neighbor, that it can become meaningful, that its fabric can be woven with depth and joy and hope. To settle for less is to settle for mere existence. Something within us senses that we were made for more than that. So join me in considering what I think is the sine qua non, the bottom line, the non-negotiable, for discovering a life worth living. Embrace this principle and life will bring meaning and joy. Ignore this principle, and ultimately whatever else you accomplish or possess will not be enough. I invite you to explore with me the unfailing truth that love is the way. Michael B. Brown. Chapter 1. What the World Needs Now. We've known for a long, long time that more than anything else, what the world truly needs is love. People were discussing it, professing it, saying it, and singing it for centuries before a pop record reiterated the message back in the 60s. Wars and rumors of wars abound. Military action in Afghanistan and genocide in Syria. Unrest in Pakistan, Libya, and Nigeria. Oppression and suffering in the Sudan, Somalia, and Yemen. Nuclear threats associated with North Korea and Iran. The new Russia becoming the old Cold War Russia and trying to dictate the affairs of Europe and the U.S. Shooters attacking innocent victims in public places. Rogue police officers caught on film abusing and even murdering people of color. And escalating political vitriol serve as daily reminders that love is not the central force of the world in which we live. So do all the alarming statistics about the abuse of women, children, and the aged, as well as the constant barrage of anger articulated from far-right and far-left commentators on TV, talk radio, and social media. Obviously and sadly, authentic love is not the guiding principle of our society. Many fear, in fact, that the discipline of loving has been lost in the shuffle, reduced to the arenas of Hollywood and Hallmark cards. Many of the Woodstock generation who clung to the hope that love would prevail have long since tuned out, conceding that the reality of a greed and self-driven worldview was ultimately too strong an opponent to overcome. Admittedly, countless post-boomers agree that those aging voices who quit believing in the power of love were correct to concede. Violence is commonplace, from Uganda to the West Bank to inner-city ghettos to the comfortable habits of the very rich. Deadbeat dads and drugged-out moms neglect the vulnerable and set in motion a continuing cycle of human tragedy. The stoning of Soraya M. is not a fantasy, its thesis being replicated daily in countries and cultures the world around. Greed of epidemic proportion paved the way for Pied Pipers such as Bernie Madoff to swindle billions and significantly contribute to the near collapse of the global economic community. Human trafficking is a staggering reality. The divorce rate remains near 50%. 1/3 of American adults at any given moment are dealing with depression, and 3 out of 4 with loneliness. In short, to borrow Michael Scheuer's book title, some would argue that as a society we seem to be marching toward hell. Take, for instance, a husband, father, grandfather, and well-known captain of American industry. With a wave of his hand, he could set in motion business decisions that would affect every aspect of our culture and generate billions of dollars for his company. As one might imagine, he had countless hangers-on. Acquaintances, business suitors, and people climbing their own ladders who felt that being close to him would hasten their ascent. He had all the things that money can buy, but as it turned out, that was not enough. One evening, his college-aged granddaughter stopped by the mansion where the business tycoon had lived with his wife for over half a century. The wife was out at one of her numerous, almost nightly civic engagements. He spent the evening as usual alone, accompanied by CNN and expensive bourbon. When the granddaughter entered the house and called his name, there was no response. Climbing the winding staircase to the bedrooms above, she continued calling for him but was met with only silence. When she pushed open his bedroom door, she discovered the lifeless body of her wealthy grandfather, a power player in American industry, stretched out across the bed. On one side of his body lay a pistol. On the other was a handwritten note that simply said, "I would have traded all to have been loved by someone." The gentleman who told me that story had been a college classmate of the unhappy tycoon who ended his life and left behind the heartrending note. The man told me of commencement weekend at his undergraduate school many years before. He had sat with a group of fellow graduating classmates as they discussed their dreams for the future. One by one, each student responded to the question, "What do you want to do with your life?" Some wanted to marry and begin a family. Some wanted to land the right job. A couple of them desired to backpack through Europe before settling into 9-to-5 work. Others, such as the man telling the story, already had plans for graduate school. One young man in the group spoke clearly and with conviction, saying, "I want to make all the money I can, and then I want to make some more." My acquaintance concluded his story by saying, "That young graduating senior succeeded. He became incredibly wealthy. And one night years later, his granddaughter entered a room and found his body and a note upon the bed." Greed, of course, is not the only desire that misguides us in our quest for meaning. My older son, a substance abuse counselor, sometimes observes with a touch of dark humor that his job will never be adversely impacted by a weak economy. His statement is sad but true. Consider many of our attempts to find something that is lacking in life, or to escape life's too often discouraging realities: chemical dependency, obesity, sexual addiction, and so on. All indicate the presence of an almost insatiable hunger to find something, anything that makes life worth living, or at the very least less painful. And in many cases, having devoured what we thought would feed the hunger, we feel just as empty inside as we did before, and thus seek something else or something more with increased urgency. Consider, for example, the sad saga of prominent athletes, performers, especially those who become exceedingly famous at an early age, or politicians who could not find an adequate sense of self-worth despite almost unparalleled financial or professional success, and whose bright stars were extinguished through uncontrolled self-indulgence. Here's the bottom line. Happiness is not attained by having more rooms in your house or followers on Twitter or photos in People magazine. Rather, at the end of the day, you and I can find happiness only to the extent that we are loved and that we actively love. Those are the keys. Only through the discipline of daily loving can anyone hope to discover deep personal meaning in and satisfaction with life. The title of Jude Devereux's novel says it so succinctly. We all need someone to love. It is not enough merely to have someone love us. As important as that is, and it is, to find ultimate meaning and joy, we are wired to make a meaningful contribution to the world. We are designed to love others. Anything less fails to fulfill. I knew a man named Larry. He served for years as the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Then one morning, with no warning, he simply refused to get out of bed. His wife Sarah, frightened and unsure of what to do, phoned a minister who lived nearby. The minister arrived within a half hour and was taken directly to Larry's bedroom, where he found the CEO lying in a fetal position beneath the covers. Upon asking what was going on, the voice from beneath those covers replied, "I cannot do it anymore. I cannot go back into that building." "But," the clergyman retorted, "you have to. People are waiting on you, counting on you." At that point, Larry inched out from beneath the sheets and blankets, sat up, and began to talk. "I put together multi-million-dollar deals all day long. It's not easy. People have to perform quickly and without error to make it happen, and I'm the best of the best. That's why I run the place. It is successful because I demand that my executives be as capable and as relentless as I am. I snap my fingers and they jump. I bark an order and they tremble. I say the word and they're gone. Good people who studied hard and worked hard but one day made a critical mistake. I say the word and they're gone. So, Larry continued, I am given respect, but it is based on fear. I see it in my employees' eyes when I walk in a room. I can no longer live like this, knowing that everyone is afraid of me the moment they see me approach. I want someone on this planet to respect me without fearing me. With that, the covers went back over his head. The neighborhood minister was wise. He acted not in that moment as the non-directive, client-centered counselor he ordinarily was, but instead provided helpful advice like a caring grandfather. Larry, he said, I know exactly what you ought to do. You need to spend some time serving people instead of managing them. Larry peeked out from under the covers. Why don't you volunteer someplace, helping people who cannot help themselves, the clergyman posed. By this point, Larry was sitting up again, curious but obviously dubious. How can I do that, he asked. There are only so many hours and they are slammed. Larry, the minister answered, you have the same number of hours every week that the rest of us do, 168. We all choose how to use them. Upon the recommendation of another friend, Larry began volunteering 2 hours a week at a local rehab center. He would read to patients, feed them, help bathe them, wheel them into an outdoor courtyard, and sit with them in the sunshine. He reported to his wife and the minister that it was wonderful to see their faces when I walk in the room. They break into smiles. Some of them can't speak, but I can see the gratitude in their eyes. They need me. And, best of all, not a single one of them is afraid of me. In time, Larry made good on his original threat. He refused to go back into his office at the firm. He submitted his letter of resignation and immediately assumed a full-time position at the rehab center for 25% of the salary he had previously earned. I bumped into Larry and his wife at a restaurant less than a year later. They were sipping wine and gazing at each other like young lovers. Larry said, I love what I'm doing, and I never have to force myself to get out of bed in the morning. Sarah held his hand and smiled. Looking at me, she said, I lost my old husband, but I like this new one better. Larry found life by learning to give it away, by offering love to and accepting love from others. You don't need a PhD to understand the global ramifications of Larry's epiphany. What would happen if individuals and nations moved from power-based or fear-based philosophies of life to one that simply affirmed that love is the better reality? What effect might that have on the hot spots around the globe that strike terror into our hearts every time we pick up the morning news? What difference could it make in North Korea, the Sudan, Israel, Somalia, Syria, Russia, Ferguson, Charleston, or wherever we happen to be? What difference would it make vis-a-vis prejudice, hatred, revenge, violence, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or the abuse of the very young, old, and vulnerable? We know the answer to that question without having to be coached. Swords at long last would be beaten into plowshares. Is it beyond our powers to imagine a world where political leaders possess sufficient courage to practice peace based on love rather than power based on fear? Is it beyond our powers to imagine a world where journalists and voters make a covenant that leaders who do not govern that way will be replaced by other leaders who do? The pessimist would argue that the likelihood of world leaders embracing a philosophy of love is not only wishful thinking, but uninformed thinking. They would contend that things such as competition for land, oil, and religious dominance preclude the possibility of lasting peace. Certainly, they would give little credence to the dreams of poets, philosophers, sages, and theologians who have insisted and continue to insist that there is a better way to exist and a new ideology can be adopted. Carl Jung was correct when he suggested that people take on an air of condescension and smile at the very thought of the philosopher's answer. And yet, how do you respond to the reality that those voices and their stated dreams persist, and that something within humanity longs to listen? The very fact that the teachings of Jesus, the Buddhas, and Gandhi are still around after all these years, that they remain globally popular, attests to a longing within human hearts for something better, deeper, and more peaceful. And if people of all time periods throughout history have hungered for a way of living with greater depth and meaning, then we who have created faulty systems have the power to create new ones. That is simple logic. The management of life is the property of those who are living. If enough of us no longer trust the old systems, new systems can be established. History is filled with illustrations of that truth. What if enough people become sufficiently and vocally dissatisfied with systems built on fear and power? What if enough people finally agreed on what the world actually needs in order to become a habitable and hospitable place? You may be saying, I cannot change the world. Okay, I will grant you that, for now, though I contend that you can be part of the movement that can alter the world. Still, if you cannot change the world, you absolutely can change your world. And that may have the unexpected ripple effect of changing much more than just your own private domain. Consider the example of a chef I know in Brooklyn, New York. He owns a wonderful Italian restaurant to which people from all over the city flock night after night. A frequent diner at his restaurant asked him if there is a secret formula to his cooking, something that makes his fare tastier and more popular than that of others. He answered that the secret is his mother. She taught him to cook with love. Despite some obvious dismissive or condescending smiles among his listeners, he continued very seriously to explain that his mother was a first-generation immigrant. They didn't have much money growing up, but had the best meals of anyone he knew. Mama cooked authentic Northern Italian food, the real deal. And he recalled how she used to say, "When I cook, I think of the people who will sit at the table and how much I love them. So I try to prepare food that will make them happy." Mama's chief ingredient was love, love for the people who would eat her food. When he became an adult and chose to be a chef, the seed Mama had planted in him blossomed. Throughout his whole career, he has imagined the people who would sit at his tables and has tried to prepare food that will make them happy. His mother had no fantasy of changing the world through what she did in her kitchen, but her main ingredient was love, and that had a profound effect on a little boy who watched her cook. So all these years later, he passes along to others what he received from her. People drive from all 5 New York City boroughs to eat at his tables. Their lives are enriched and their spirits are lifted because when he prepares for them, his main ingredient is love. Each of us can do something to make our corner of the world better and brighter if we live our lives based on the principle of active loving. If one's way of living has not brought you personal peace or joy, a new way of living can be adopted. Whatever your age or station, you can change your way of doing business, and that will ultimately change your appreciation of the life you live. You can decide to love. You can decide to make that the central guiding principle of your relationships, the main ingredient in your recipe of life. This is a commitment you can make fresh every morning. Today I will be motivated first and foremost by the principle of love. Maybe I failed to do that yesterday, I have no idea what tomorrow will bring, but today I will be motivated first and foremost by the principle of love. It is a decision you have the freedom and power to make, and it is a portal to personal
Sample complete. Ready to continue?